The dollar's going to go higher as the turmoil increases worldwide, and as the dollar goes higher, gold and silver will probably continue under pressure. At some point, the dollar will get overvalued. It may turn into a bubble. I will have to sell my U.S. dollars, and I will put my money into gold and silver, or maybe the renminbi, the Chinese currency, which by then should be convertible.
The most significant results encountered for this Canadian mining region in over a decade. With a Canadian Mining Hall of Fame legend at the helm for more discoveries statistically than 1,000 geologists combined, this is the one hard asset stock to research right now. Learn more at crushthestreet.com/hardassets.
Hello everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I'm here with Jim Rogers. He's a legendary investor. He's a well-renowned speaker, and he holds multiple world records. He's an author of multiple books. And today we're going to get an economic and geopolitical update with the man himself. Jim Rogers, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Sounds like fun.
Well, you know, it's been a real crazy 2015, and I just wanted to start off with this. A couple weeks ago, President Obama mocked Republicans, saying they are down on America. That was his words towards them. He quoted things like the job growth rate is at levels we haven't seen since the 90s. More Americans are covered with health insurance, which are hitting record highs. And he points out that the doom and gloom predictions of his political enemies look ever more at odds with reality. Sir, I just wanted to start off with this. Does he have a point, or is he missing something very large?
Well, first of all, America is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. So if you give me a few $1 trillion, I'll show you a very good time. But in the end, somebody's got to pay for it. And while, yes, some people are better off these days than they were last year or the year before, most of us are not, or many people are not, I should say. And it's all being done at the gigantic cost of printing money and gigantic debt. This is fun for some people right now, but this is going to be a disaster in the end.
When it comes to, we had a presidential debate tonight, and everyone's wondering what's going on in 2016. Do you see, and do you concern yourself with who the next president is, and do you think he or she will make a difference with the trajectory of the U.S. economy?
Well, whoever is president, their friends will be better off. There's no question about that. But most of us are not going to be better off unless we happen to be friends with the right people. No, the debt's going to go higher. The absurd intervention worldwide is going higher. The absurd intervention domestically is going higher. So no. I don't think it matters very much at all. It never has. It hasn't. I mean, for instance, I thought George Bush would go down in history as the worst president in American history. Along came Obama. I mean, gosh, who's even worse.
Well, and it's amazing to think that there's another potential Bush lined up to be president, although I don't think he's got much of a chance. I think he's better off hanging out at Disney World in Florida. But when it comes...
There's also another potential Clinton who could be president,
Yeah, exactly.
Get worse and worse. In the old days, we got rid of these guys and found somebody new to make mistakes. Now we're finding the same old people.
Jim, this question is specific to you because you live in Asia, and I wanted to talk to you about the Chinese stock market, specifically the Shanghai Composite, which saw a peak this year and has fallen roughly 40% off its high and has rebounded from that point. Now, it's actually worth noting that this stock market is actually still up. When you look at from the beginning of the year to where we are now, we're actually up pretty substantially, even with that 40% correction. But I wanted to get your prognosis on this and ask you, I mean, is this the beginning of a bear market? Are we seeing the volatility start to enter this stock market? And are we going to see further downtrends from here? Or are we going to continue to see an upward trajectory in the Chinese economy?
It had a correction, but the Shanghai Stock Exchange is the strongest stock market in the world this year. It's up almost 50%. The American Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange is up 4%. Well, I own, I think my Chinese shares are probably my largest stock holding. Who knows what's going to happen in the future. but I bought more shares in China last week. I'm worried about the world. I'm extremely worried about the world going forward, and that's going to affect everybody, including China, obviously. Anybody in China who does business with the West is going to feel the effects. But many parts of the Chinese economy are going to continue to boom no matter what happens in the West. I mean, China's spending staggering amounts of money cleaning up the filth. China's very polluted, terribly polluted, and they're spending money, lots of money, to clean up China. So some parts of the Chinese economy will boom no matter what happens to the world.
Jim, when it comes to the Asian perception of the U.S., we've had the issues just not that long ago with the ships over in the South China Sea. What, from your perspective, actually being in Asia, and maybe it's different in Singapore than it is in China and some other parts, but what is the perspective from people? What do people and their perception of the U.S., what is the perception of the U.S. over in Asia?
Well, people in Asia love American people, and they're very keen. Many of them are keen to go to school in the U.S. or visit the U.S. or even immigrate to the U.S. Many of them worry about the U.S. government. I do too, as something seems to happen to people when they go to Washington. They seem to change, to become different people. But no, most people in Asia are keen on U.S. citizens and want to visit and immigrate or study in the U.S. By the way, I don't agree with them about U.S. education, but it doesn't matter. America's done a fabulous job of convincing people that U.S. education is great, and so many people want to go there and study. I came the other way, obviously. I know China. I know Asian education is better than certainly better than U.S. education, but the perception here is that let's all go to the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. I have a family member who went to a private school who predominantly catered to foreign students. They send their kids across the country, and they don't even live together, and that's just high school. And then you have colleges where kids come and they have their very wealthy families who just pay for all their stuff because they want to be here to get their education. And what's really blowing me away is the amount of specifically Chinese that come to California. There's certain areas in California where they come and they buy homes out cash as investments because they want to park their money in the U.S. for, I guess, they believe it's some sort of safe haven. Why are we seeing this perception of these people come to America? Why are they resulting to put their money in America?
Well, it's mainly historic more than anything else. I own more U.S. dollars on the long side than any other currency at the moment. For that exact reason, there is turmoil coming, and many people still perceive the U.S. dollar and the U.S. It's not a safe haven. The dollar is certainly not a safe haven, but it's perceived that way. So when the turmoil, and as you may know, the U.S. dollar is making new highs this week because of this perception. And as the turmoil gets worse, my theory is more people will buy the U.S. dollar. It'll go higher and higher. They're not going to buy the yen. They're not going to buy the euro. They don't know what else to do with it. So they're going to buy U.S. dollars. And that's the same reason that some people are diversifying into the U.S. In my view, everybody, including Americans, should have international diversification. And the U.S. is a home at the moment of some of this international diversification. By the way, Americans should have international diversification too. But that's why you see the Chinese, and not just the Chinese, many Asians pouring into the U.S. I think they're going the wrong place, but that's who cares? It's none of my business.
It takes a long time, right, for that perception to actually change. And I guess that's something investors need to consider when they put their money in a certain place. And I think that's something you have, and you've accurately done, because I think in our last interview, you said the same thing, that your largest cash holdings is U.S. dollars. And obviously that's done well for you, regardless of the macroeconomic situation, which would probably suggests not to be in U.S. dollars. Which actually leads me into my next topic. I just want to get your thoughts on precious metals. October, September kind of seemed like this really optimistic time for precious metals, and we saw mining companies start to really take off, and it almost felt as if this was the moment where we were going to see that turnaround. In your experience and just with your experience in markets, what did we just see here with precious metals making a run and then just kind of falling back to that bear market sentiment?
Well, what we saw was what happens in markets all the time. A rally, a false rally. I own gold and silver. I've hedged some of it, but I haven't bought gold and silver for a long time. I still expect better opportunities in the future to buy gold and silver. Gold and silver may well turn into a bubble someday, but in the meantime, I expect there to be better opportunities. My view of what's going to happen is, we explained before about the U.S. dollar and U.S. markets, property and other things in the eyes of foreigners. The dollar's going to go higher as the turmoil increases worldwide, and as the dollar goes higher, gold and silver will probably continue under pressure. They often have historically, not always. I hasten to tell you, not always. But gold and silver will be under pressure. At some point, the dollar will get overvalued. It may turn into a bubble. I will have to sell my U.S. dollars. At that point, chances are, if gold and silver are down, which is possible, then I would put my money into gold and silver, or maybe the renminbi, the Chinese currency, which by then should be convertible. So this is the way I'm viewing the world at the moment. But I hasten to tell you, my views could change this afternoon.
I understand. Jim, I just wanted to ask you, get your thoughts on. I don't know where you stand on this, and do you believe that the U.S. is provoking war, and there's an intent to maintain its position as the world reserve currency, and there's this military-industrial complex behind the motives for the conflicts that are going on in the Middle East and even in areas like Asia? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know that it's that there's some kind of giant conspiracy in Washington, but I do know that we are provoking war. There's no question. I mean, it's astonishing what we did in Ukraine. Unfortunately, we got outsmarted. Then it's astonishing what we've done in Iraq and Syria, especially Syria now, where we're being outsmarted again. We started the whole thing in Syria. We started the whole thing in Ukraine. And then we have egg on our face. I don't know what happens in Washington, why people think they can throw their weight around. I think you see them sending boats into what is historically Chinese territory. Now, if the Chinese or anybody, the Russians, started sending boats up to New Orleans or near New Orleans or Mobile, can you imagine the shrieking, or Los Angeles? If Chinese or Russian boats started sailing from Los Angeles to San Francisco,
it would be mayhem.
It would be worse. I'm sure they'd be bombed. It would be chaos everywhere. But we're doing that. We're quote sending all these things into Asia, into Korea, and Australia. We're opening a military base in Australia, all aimed at China. If China started doing that, or Russia, if anybody started doing that, oh my goodness. So yes, there certainly is some there are people who accuse America of being warlike and aggressive, and recent evidence certainly shows that might be true. I mean, you know what happened in Iraq. We invaded a country based on false information, or false propaganda. I mean, this has happened several times in the last couple of decades, which is scary.
Yeah, and so kind of going back to the perception in Asia, do Asians see Americans as a threat when they see the American flag and the troops there? Are they scared, or do they feel safe that Americans are there with their bases and policing the world?
Well, more and more Asians certainly. I mean, you must read that. Maybe you don't, but certainly many Asians now say, "Wait a minute, this is not what we thought was going to happen." The Chinese, even some of the South Koreans, or South Koreans now say, "We wish the American bases weren't here." Vietnamese, many Asian countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, are worried because they want to be friends with China. They also want to have prosperity, which they've been having for the past several decades. The last thing they want to do is get sucked into some kind of military confrontation, much less military tension.
Jim, I know you tour speaking. Do you have any speaking engagements coming up?
Oh, I'll be in Mexico next week, as a matter of fact, Cancun. I've got several in China in the next month. Yeah, I got a lot on my plate for the rest of this year. Mainly, let's say, I'm going to Cancun, going to Moscow tonight for some TV shows and a board meeting, several in China. Yeah, it's a busy year still.
Well, that sounds good. And just a brief moment, could you share your general message that you're sharing in these different areas of the world?
Well, mainly I'm worried. It's been 6.5 years since the bull market started in the U.S. and therefore most of the world, and that's unusual. Every 4 to 7 years throughout American history, we've had setbacks and consolidations or something, economic problems. So we're overdue. It's all based on staggering amounts of money printing and debt, not just in the U.S., but worldwide. So I'm very cautious. I'm worried. The central banks are not giving up. The central banks are continuing to panic and put more money into the system. So it could turn into, the stock market could turn into a bubble before it's over. But I'm very cautious. And I'm not really rushing out to buy a lot of things at the moment. I did buy some more China recently. Even China's now going up a lot. As I said before, it's up nearly 50% this year. I might buy more Russia, but there are not many things that are really depressed at the moment. And I don't like buying things making new highs or going through the roof.
If people wanted to follow you, Jim, and stay up to speed with your books and your speaking arrangements, where would they go? And how would they be able to reach out to you?
Well, I have JimRogers.com is my website, and my speaking appointments are there. My public appearances are on JimRogers.com. They can buy books anywhere if they want to buy my books. But I don't really, I don't have a website. I don't have a blog. I don't have a Twitter account. I don't have a Facebook account. I'm afraid I'm not very social media active. But there is the website which gives my schedule, and unfortunately or unfortunately, a lot of my speeches and appearances do get reported, so they wind up on YouTube and in Google.
Hey, well, we'll do our best over here to make sure this interview gets as much coverage as possible. I really do appreciate you coming on with me today and sharing your thoughts.
Good. It's been fun. Let's do it again.